Welcome to part 1 of my Planet Defense game series. In this series, we're building a complete game step by step using Phaser 4. You'll find the full playlist linked in the description down below. Welcome back. In this video, we'll get everything set up so you can start building the Planet Defense game alongside me. First, let's download our starter files. For this series, I've created a basic project template that comes with a folder structure that works great for Phaser, has all the assets we'll need for our project, and a tiny bit of boilerplate for our Phaser game configuration and our initial scenes we'll be using. You can find a link to the project template in the description down below. To follow along, please download that zip folder now, and when you extract it, you should see the following folder contents. Our assets folder has all the audio and images we'll be using for our game, as well as the Phaser library version we'll be using, so Phaser 4. Our source folder has all of our JavaScript code and our basic boilerplate for our project template, and then we have a few additional files for our project. Next, to follow along with the series, you'll need a code editor and a local web server. For this series, I'll be using Phaser Launcher, which is a free app for creating Phaser games quickly and simply. Phaser Launcher is a code editor and includes a local web server that you don't have to configure. However, if you have your own preferred IDE and local web server, you're welcome to follow along using those tools. So now we have our project template. We need to open this in Phaser Launcher. So under the Projects tab, I'm going to go to Import. I'm going to find our Phaser 4 Planet Defense Project Starter template. I'm going to open that folder, and now our project will be available to us in Phaser Launcher. Let's open our project now. So now we've imported our project, let's run our game on our local web server. Let's click our Play Game button at the top of Phaser Launcher. This should launch our game, and we should see a black canvas element with this space background. In our console, we should see 2 log lines tied to our 2 Phaser scenes. So now we've verified our project's working, let's take a quick look at the code we're starting with. Our index.html is our web page for our game. This has some basic styling and references a background image from our assets to create that space background that we saw. Besides this, we import our Phaser library, and then we reference the main entry point for our web application, which will be our source main.js file. Under our source folder, if we open up main.js, here is where we're creating our Phaser game configuration. We're creating our Phaser game instance based on the configuration, and then we're adding in our 2 basic scenes and starting our preload scene once our game is ready. For our game, we've enabled arcade physics by default, and we set our gravity to be 0. Besides this, we set some of our default scaling options, so our canvas element will take up as much room as possible with respect to our aspect ratio we specify with our width and height. Next, if we go into our scenes folder, let's open up our preload scene. This is just a basic Phaser scene instance, and all we're doing is in our create method, we're logging out our message that our preload scene was called. We then immediately transition to our game scene, and we do the similar thing where we log out our message. Finally, under our comment folder, we have our assets.js and our scenekeys.js files. Both of these files have objects that have key value pairs that we'll be using throughout our code. Currently, our scene keys object has all of the keys that we'll be using for our various Phaser scenes. As an example, if we open up our game scene, we'll see in our constructor for our super call, for our key name, we're referencing our scene keys object with our game scene property. This allows us to reuse those same strings across multiple files in our project, such as in our preload scene, we will reference our game scene here. For our assets.js file, this has all of the strings we'll be using for our asset keys once we load in our assets for our game. And then we have some configuration settings for our various assets we need to load in, such as our sprite sheets that has our information such as our frame width and height, our path to our asset, and then information regarding our animations. Then in our assets.js file, first we have our assets keys, and this has all of the keys we'll be using once we load in our assets in our next video. Besides that, we have a few different objects tied to our various asset types that has metadata tied to our asset key we want to use, our path to our file, as well as related metadata for that file type. As an example for our sprite sheets, we have metadata tied to our sprite sheets width and height for each of our frames. And we'll cover this more in our next video. Finally, at the root of our project, we have this project_task.todo file. This file has a checklist of all the various steps we'll need to complete in order to create our game. You can reference this as you follow along with each video in this series. Alright, so now that we set up our project, we've seen how we can run our project locally, and we reviewed our initial project template, that brings this video to an end. In our next video, we'll load our Earth and player turret sprites and get the satellite orbiting around the planet using a bit of trigonometry. Let's jump in.